Hi there. Now, I hope you've all had a good read of my blog on bad debts and bad debt provisions. And I also like to think that you've had a good go at the question I set. Now, I'm going to go through the answers and show you how the figures are arrived at and the double entry we need to use to introduce and adjust the bad debt provision. So hopefully you got the same figures as me, but if not, you'll be able to see where you went slightly astray. So Green Apple Limited have got trade receivables of £80,000. Now, given past history, they've decided it would be prudent to introduce a bad debt provision of 5%. So 5% of £80,000 gives a figure of £4,000. So they think, given what's gone in the past, that of the £80,000 that they are owed by their customers, around about £4,000 of that is going to go bad. But they don't know who it is who isn't going to pay them. So they're going to introduce a general bad debt provision. So once they would have their figure, they would introduce it and they would debit the bad debt provision expense. So this would show as an expense in the statement of profit or loss. And obviously that would be £4,000. The other side would be a credit, as everything in accountancy does have to balance, and the credit would be to the bad debt provision. So this would be a credit, and again that would be £4,000. And this credit would offset the debit of our trade receivables to come to a more realistic figure of what Green Apple Limited is likely to receive in the future from its customers. So we don't credit the sales ledger control because we're not writing these debts off because we would still like to chase them, but we're being prudent. And so the credit in the bad debt provision would offset the debit of £80,000 in the sales ledger control or trade receivables to come to a more likely figure that Green Apple Limited are likely to be paid of £76,000. So that's the first year. So moving on to the second year, trade receivables has now risen to £120,000. However, it has come to the attention of Green Apple Limited that one of its customers, Blue Grape PLC, is definitely not going to pay them. It could be that they've just not responded to any chase-up emails or letters or solicitors' letters. It could be they've had notice that they've gone into receivership or liquidation. Either way, Green Apple Limited know that Blue Grape PLC will not be paying them £5,000. So they can write that debt off because they know who it is and how much it is for. So they're going to deduct £5,000 from our trade receivables figure. So that would mean we have a net figure of trade receivables of £115,000. So the double entry for the debt of Blue Grape PLC will be debit the bad debt expense account with £5,000. Now we know who it is and how much it is. The credit will go to trade receivables because we're actually going to write it off. We're just going to accept that we are not going to get that money. And again, that will be £5,000. So we've written off the specific bad debt. We can now start to think about the general provision for bad debts. So after writing off the Blue Grape PLC debt, Green Apple Limited are left with £115,000 which is owed to them. During the year, Green Apple Limited appointed a new credit controller who was obviously a little bit more on the ball than the last one, because history suggests that during the year that only 3% of debts were going bad. So we still don't know which 3% is going to be, but it'd still be prudent to introduce a provision of, or have a provision of 3%, which gives us a balance of £3,450. So that's what we want our bad debt provision to be. However, we already have a provision in place of £4,000 from the previous year. So instead of introducing a provision of £3,450, we just want to adjust our opening figure of £4,000 down to £3,450. So we're going to actually reduce our opening provision by £550 because it's slightly too much than what we want. So to reduce a provision, remember in the previous year we entered a credit, we're going to enter a debit this time. I'm going to debit bad debt provision, and that would be in this statement of financial position or balance sheet with £550, and then we'd actually credit the bad debt provision expense account with £550. So the previous expense we recognise was slightly a bit too much than what we actually need. So we're going to release some of that expense. We're actually going to have a negative expense in our statement of profit and loss. So in our statement of profit and loss, we will show the movement, which is £550, but in our balance sheet or statement of financial position, we'll actually show the closing figure, which is £3,450. So remember, we deal with any specific bad debts first. So that's anyone you know who it is and how much it is. We will write that off, and then we'll calculate a general bad debt provision. And then once you have a bad debt provision in place, all we will be doing each year will be adjusting it up or down to what we want our final bad debt provision to be.